If you were an alien from outer space, okay, I bet that's something you never thought you'd hear in church. But if you were an alien from outer space and you came to Earth to spend time with humans, it'd be pretty easy to figure out what matters to us. Imagine for a second that this alien lands at your school and he reports back to the mothership. Here's what the humans care about. They care about Fortnite, Doritos, especially the Cool Ranch, Snapchat, and Yeezys, whatever those are. It's true, right? And imagine, even if it seems a little awkward, one thing they'd report that matters a lot is sex. Yeah, here's what I mean. Every teenage comedy movie is about sex. Every Netflix show seems to be about sex and sexual in nature. A lot of songs you listen to refer to all kinds of sexual things. People in the locker room love to talk about their sexual experience and everybody else's. All the most laughed at jokes are about sex. A lot of conversations in the hallway on Monday are about who hooked up with who that weekend. So if you were an alien visiting Earth, you would probably end up thinking that sex is a pretty big deal. But at the same time, if you were to talk to all those people at your school, all the teenagers in your community, in our country, you might get the opposite impression, right? You might come to the conclusion that sex is no big deal at all. Even though you're surrounded by messages and images and conversations about sex, most of them add up to this single idea. It doesn't matter. Maybe you've heard something like this before. Sex isn't a big deal. Or everybody, literally everybody is having sex. Statistically, by the way, that's not true. A hookup is totally casual. It's harmless fun. Or sex is just part of being an adult. So unless you live under a rock, you've heard or seen something like this from movies, TV, music, and conversations at school. In fact, some of you may even get the message from people closest to you, like your parents, older siblings, or friends. And maybe even you've wondered, if everybody in the world tends to agree sex isn't a big deal, why does it seem like the adults in our life, especially the churchy adults, act like it matters so much? And if everybody having sex acts like it's no big deal, why does it seem like some people seem to care about it so much? Okay, they're good questions, and you're not wrong to ask them. And as we talk about them today, I want to start with just one simple idea that may help clear it all up. Sex is treated as casual, but it is so much more powerful than we actually give it credit for being. Okay, for example, breakups. Breakups often hurt worse and hurt for much longer when you've had sex. I've heard student after breakup talk about that numb feeling or that part of them that they could never get back. Here's why I believe those feelings linger. Because sex is powerful. Even if sex was handled casually, it doesn't mean it was casual. And it makes the pain worse when the relationship doesn't work out. Okay, cheating's a big deal, especially in marriage. Think about it. If sex wasn't a big deal, if it doesn't matter, then why does cheating matter so much? Why are people the most hurt and the most upset and the most angry when someone cheats on someone else sexually? Or when you hear about someone being sexually abused, it jolts you. It's true. It's not that other ways people are abused don't bother you. It's just that it seems so much more upsetting when the abuse is sexual. I know, it's dark. I get it. But I'm not saying sex is bad or you'll die if you have sex. I'm just saying it's more powerful than we give it credit for. And it's easier to think of sex as being no big deal and casual, but it's just not the case. Some things that God made are simply more powerful than others. Elephants, they're more powerful than crickets. Thunderstorms are more powerful than rain showers. And yes, sex is more powerful than dating or making out or having a crush on someone. But why? And who cares? Okay, well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. The letter we're going to look at was one Paul sent to a city named Corinth. Now, we know in this ancient city, it was famous for bad behavior. In this particular passage, Paul talks to them about sexuality and their bodies. And here's how it starts. Run from sexual sin. Of course he starts it that way. Isn't that how every churchy person starts the conversation about sex? It's not that surprising. In fact, some translations even use the word flee instead of run, which sounds even more intense. But before you get even more uncomfortable and bummed out than you are right now, I want to point out one word that we all sometimes miss. It's the word sin, or in some translations, the word immorality. Paul isn't saying sex is a bad thing. In fact, like we said last week, God made sex. Paul is just saying sexual immorality, or sex outside of what God created it to be, is a bad thing. Then he says something strange. Not awkward strange, but just strange. He says, no other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. To which his audience was probably thinking, are you talking about affecting the body in a good way or a bad way? So he explains it. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Now, this is a twist that was surprising for them to hear. What in the world does that mean? Okay, well, if you were here for part 1, we talked about how sexual activity is a big deal because it involves the way we treat other people and how it affects their future. But Paul is going even further. Paul basically is saying that when you take steps with someone sexually, you're allowing them to affect your heart, your emotions, your future, your reputation, and your conscience. And by the way, that's how sex was made to work. From the beginning, God designed it to be a bond between two married people, to involve their hearts, their emotions, and their futures. Sex was made to have an impact in someone's life. In other words, sex was made to matter. And Paul is pointing out that even when we act like it doesn't, even when we treat it casually, even when we have sex outside of God's design for it, it still has an impact on us. I think that's why Paul started this section by saying, run, to a group of people who were used to treating sex as something they ran towards, not ran away from. He was opening their eyes and ours to the fact that sex has a powerful effect on us, whether we can see that right now or not. He's basically saying sex was made to matter. So treat sex like it matters. It's basically what Paul is saying to the people in this town of Corinth who read this letter. It seems like a harmless match or a candle, and it seems fun, but it has the potential to do a lot of damage. Don't see sex as a casual thing, because it ain't. If you see it that way, it doesn't mean that the other person will see it that way. Run away from that type of casual thinking. See it as something that matters to both of you. Because, see, here's the deal. Treating sex like it doesn't matter is the same as playing with fire. Then Paul adds an exclamation point. He says, don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? This is a rhetorical question, meaning he didn't expect them to answer it out loud. He knew they knew the answer. Your body, which was given to you by God, was meant to belong to God. He doesn't treat it casually, so you shouldn't either. In the same way, don't allow someone else to view your body casually either. Some of you are currently experiencing the negative impact of someone else's casual approach to sex. Maybe your family life has been broken up because of an affair. Maybe you know people who have been affected by a sexually transmitted disease or an unplanned pregnancy. Maybe you've seen a friend struggle with regret or heartache because of a previous relationship and things that seemed casual at the time. Don't you wish you could go back in time and tell all of these people that sex was made to matter? Don't you wish that you could tell them to run from sexual immorality? And don't you wish that they would go back in time and listen and do something different? Here's the thing about sexual relationships, especially in high school and middle school. By the way, it's not only sex, but it's all the stuff that leads up to it. But these relationships are not permanent. Let me explain what I mean. We act like they're permanent. We feel like they're permanent. But in reality, there's no shared bank accounts. There's no shared names, no shared housing, no shared legal standing. We've all seen couples break up who we thought would be together forever. It's just a normal part of life right now. This doesn't mean that relationships won't eventually become permanent. They just aren't right now. But by having sex, two people allow their physical, emotional, and spiritual selves to become connected in a way that was meant to be permanent. And because sex is so powerful, the emotions and scars that remain after a couple breaks up can be devastating. And sometimes you don't even realize it until a couple of years down the road. In essence, what you intended to be powerfully good in marriage becomes powerfully harmful in promises made casually. Okay, remember how Paul started the verse, run? Well, when you run away from something, you got to run towards something else. When it comes to all things sex related, same is true. It's not just about getting further away from the things that could negatively impact your future and someone else's. It's about getting closer to something else. The opposite of sexual immorality is sexual integrity. Now, integrity is a word that we use a lot, and we don't really always define it. It just means being strong and honorable, honest, trustworthy. And sexual integrity is just deciding to be all those things in your sex life. So, as you run from things that have negative effects, sexual immorality, run towards things that have positive effects, sexual integrity. Then run from letting culture and music and movies define what kind of person you're going to be, or what does and doesn't matter in life. Mindlessly watching or listening to or engaging in messages about sex that act like it's no big deal. Run from anyone in your life who blurs your view of sex by trying to convince you it's no big deal. So here's what I want you to run towards. Run towards being a person who honors others, being a person who is strong enough to say no to yourself and somebody else. Run towards asking yourself, what's better for me both now and in the future? Run towards asking yourself, what's better for the other person both now and in the future? And run to refusing to participate in anything that portrays sexual immorality as casual. And here's what's great about sexual integrity. It's always possible, whether you've had sex or not. Integrity is about the kind of person you want to be now, not just how far you've gone in the past. But let me be super honest with you. Sexual integrity is not normal. It's not how everybody in our culture acts. In your school, in your life, and in the lives of many adults around you, sexual immorality is the norm. Sexual immorality is what happens when you don't think about it and don't plan for it. That's why you're going to need some intentionality. Okay, think about this. If you want to become an athlete, you plan your workouts. If you want to be wealthy, you plan your finances. And if you want to become a person of sexual integrity, as weird as that may sound, you plan on how you're going to run from sexual immorality. You have to set some boundaries and avoid tempting situations and get some accountability. Remember, sex is powerful. Sex was made to matter. We'd be foolish to think we can handle the temptation it creates without a plan or without help. All right, as you head out, I want you to imagine what your life would be like if you chose to treat sex like it matters. If you started today, right now, what would you do differently now? What would you change about what you watch, what you listen to, what you talk about? Then I want you to think forward 10 years or so. and think about yourself living that out, that sexual integrity, would you tell yourself thanks, or would you have regrets? If sex really does matter, then how will what you do now affect you then?